Hi everyone, Dr. Samantha Cotrera here for the Imagining a New We video blog, a video series designed to help history teachers and other history educators teach history in ways that are more meaningful, transformative, and inclusive for their students. Mondays are meaningful, and as I'm sure you can tell by my outfit, because I've been wearing white every Monday, I am doing a Mondays are meaningful video because Mondays are meaningful, and it's important to start the week on a right foot. And so these little videos are little introductions to bodies of theory with a reflection prompt to maybe invite you to do some of that reflection for your own practice. And for the last few weeks, I've been focusing on people that I quote in my own book, Transforming the Canadian History Classroom, Imagining a New We. It is for sale now. I hope you have your own copy. I think all of the copies that people bought on Amazon have finally come in, so I hope you have your copy. Today we are talking about Chapter 5. There are 6 chapters in the book, so we're talking about Chapter 5 today. And as I said last week, Chapter 4, where I focus on a case study of one teacher, was tough because it's difficult to be critical of teachers' practices because you engage in such important work that is so multi-layered and complex that it's so hard to even know sometimes how you're engaging in this work because you just have to do it, and it's so quick and it's so fast. And so it's hard to be critical of teachers' work, which is why Chapter 4 was always so difficult for me to write. But what's important to remember, and this is what I talk about in Chapter 5, is that teachers don't work in a vacuum. They work within an institutional context. I mean, you know this. You work within an institutional context that really frames the type of teacher that you can be. And in Chapter 5, the need for time, space, and place, I say that if the school is not set up to be a place for meaningful teaching, it won't be a place for meaningful learning for students. And this is an important element of the conversation because we can be critical of individual teachers' practices, but what are the ways that our classrooms, our schools, our boards, our curriculum shape what is possible in the history classroom? So in this chapter, I say that teachers need time to do deep thinking into historical narratives and understanding how they position themselves in those historical narratives in order to change how they teach and think about Canadian history in the classroom. It's not just like more time, it's more quality time. It's slow time, it's deliberative time, it's deliberate time to really allow these stories to become part of your own story. I say that they need space to engage in venting and reflection, deliberation on their practices. Most of the time, though, there's just space available for bitching, as one teacher said. Bitching or complaining so that it just doesn't lead to any action. It just leads to being more angry and feeling like there's less space for change in a school system. And then I also say that teachers and students need places to come together to get to know themselves outside of class time. Because when we only get to know our students in class time, we can enact curricular roles with them where they are only a student. They are not a person. They're just like that young student that's failing. And we're not thinking about that individual and what that individual needs. And it's so easy for us to say no, I'm really, really interested in student success. I really want students to be successful. So I push them really hard to make sure they're successful. Well, the school context really defines what successful is. Because I worked in mainstream schools where success was the successful completion of a course as well as high grades. And then I also worked in alternative schools. They weren't private schools. They were schools that had alternative teaching and learning arrangements for students where mainstream school didn't work for them anymore. And in the alternative school, the idea of success was very different. It wasn't just getting students to get an A. It was just really getting students to show up in class and to share their own experiences and to trust the teacher enough to move them along in their high school journey so they got a high school degree or diploma and then we're able to move along with their life. So how we even understand and enact success is contingent on the spaces that we have around us. So are there places for you to get to know your students outside of class time so that we can think of them in ways outside of these curricular roles that really just define a young person in that space as only being a student? One of the pieces of theory that I want to bring to today's short little video is a study from Lahelma and Gordon in 1997 that said, the more rigid the physical layout of the school, the greater the emphasis is on how bodies of students and teachers present themselves and take space, time, and voice. So what they're saying here is that the more rigid the space of the school, the less there is for teachers and students to be people outside of these roles of teacher and student. I went to 14 elementary schools, surprise, across the Caribbean, America, and Canada. And I went to a middle school in Florida that was designed like a jail. It was designed, it was like this box where everyone was kept in. There were locked doors, no windows outside, very segregated spaces, no lockers, because as they told me as a 11-year-old, we don't want drugs in our school or guns. And I was like, where am I? And the school was a very rigid setup, and it really just allowed us to go to class, go to where we needed to go, and that was it. There was really no like congregational spaces. I don't think it was an accident that the majority of the students at the school were Black, and that it was a poor neighborhood. I think that was a conscious decision to build schools with these kind of rigid structures to discipline the bodies of young Black students in particular ways. Whereas I have been at schools that were very open and very welcoming with big couches and an open door policy and no staff rooms. And that was a much different space. You know, I didn't have to just be a student. I could relax and hang out and just like be a person. And, you know, as a white person, as someone that was always very comfortable in schooling, I was able to move in and out of these spaces fairly easily. It wasn't difficult for me because I did always gravitate towards formal education and formal schooling, but it would be a completely different situation if I was a different type of student with a different background, a different race, different class, etc. So it really made me reflect on my own experiences as being an 11-year-old, as being a 5-year-old, as being a 14-year-old, as being a 27-year-old doing research in different schools across Ontario in particular about how these rigid spaces really shape what we think is possible for our students. And so in the Teacher's Book Club Guide, I ask, where are the places that you get to know your student outside of class time? Where are the places where you can be someone that is not just a teacher, but you can demonstrate other aspects of your personality? Where is the time or the space that you have for deliberative reflection and analysis of histories and your practice? Is it an actual physical place, or is it time with a group of teachers, maybe on Twitter, maybe through Facebook, maybe over coffee in a post-COVID world or a pre-COVID world? They allow you to do that thinking. So time, space, and place are important for getting us out of our curricular roles and inviting more meaningful teaching in our history classrooms. Please let me know below if you have that time, space, or place to do this work, and what are strategies that you have found that have been interesting or useful for you to get to know your students outside of their curricular roles. Have a great week, everyone. Next week is the last video in the series because we've reached chapter 6 in this book. First chapter was my introduction. I talked about different theory, critical race theory in particular. Chapter 2, I talk about the current context of Canada. I introduce some of my critiques of historical thinking. Chapter 3, like I said, is my favorite chapter because I'm really using the voices of students to say what they want and need in their history classroom. Chapter 4 is a difficult chapter because I focus a case study on one teacher in this one slice of time that really allow us to see how there's a gap between our pedagogy and practice when we want to bring in diverse anti-racist histories. And of course, today, chapter 5, if schools aren't places for meaningful teaching, then classrooms can't be placed for meaningful learning. And where can we find and demand the space, place, and time to be able to do this work? Next week, we talk about historic space, my favorite, and I hope you've taken a look at the historic space website already. I've been creating content for you on that website since the summer, and I'm really excited to be able to talk about it in our little video together. So have a great week, everyone, and I'll see you next week.